Well, Ed, I want to thank you for joining us today. And we're so looking forward to having the opportunity to hear a bit more about you and about your passions and about your pursuit of the humanitarian and all the good things you've been working on. But maybe as a starting point, if I could you give us sort of the Hollywood pitch version of your journey, sort of from Cuba to Atlanta, just as a backgrounder for those who haven't had the privilege to get to know you a little?
Sure, Dave, and thanks again for the invite to have this conversation with you. You are an inspiration unto yourself, and you always bring a lot of energy and positive energy to the room. For me, it's in a bit a simple story. I was born in Cuba, in Havana, Cuba, and as an infant, the revolution occurred, the communist takeover, and my parents had to flee or stay forever in a communist party. They lost everything, all their possessions, all their businesses, and you can imagine they were in their early 40s. So they brought me over to me and my sister to New York City. And I grew up there till I was about 12 years old. And we moved down to Miami, where a lot of Cubans were migrating to. And shortly thereafter, at the age of 16, I joined this package delivery company that we know is UPS. And you fast forward 44 years.
Wow.
And here I am talking to you about the humanitarian work that we're doing for beneficiaries like refugees. Yeah. So I can connect to that because, quite frankly, when I reflect on it, I am a refugee as well.
It's amazing how life works sometimes in these big circles. Where our life histories connect to a need and give us inspiration for a career. You went to law school, is that right, Ed?
I did.
And what kind of what was the thinking behind that? What inspired you for law school?
Quite frankly, I wasn't attracted to medicine, and in the Cuban culture, there's always a very high pressure to head into professions. And I always had a gift for talking to people, advocating for issues, for bringing people together. And it seemed that those, qualities early on in my childhood, because my ambition really began very early in life to become a lawyer, sort of carried through. And then it became an ambition to become a lawyer for UPS, because I had already been working with the company a number of years when I went through high school, university, and then went on to law school.
But 44 years, Ed.
Yes.
I mean, that's an extraordinary career. I mean, as you reflect back, what were some of the big challenges along the way, or the big, if you will, the big lessons along the way?
The biggest challenges, lessons were when I was approached by the company to take on responsibilities that were not core to what I did. It was those moments in time where I really equivocated. And the most valuable lesson that I learned 15 years ago, when I was approached to come to the UPS Foundation, I was lawyering for the company, really had accomplished my childhood dream. And I really thought about it long and hard about whether I wanted to do that. But like other times in my career, when an opportunity was offered, I seized it, even though I didn't really know what the end would look like. And this job as president of the UPS Foundation, and then went on to acquire the Chief Diversity and Inclusion role, have been the most rewarding and fulfilling assignments that I've had for UPS.
And Ed, I think it's fascinating because having worked with some really great lawyers over time, the skills that I've come to so admire has just been that rigor and that careful thinking and that logic about trying to work out things that are really going to make a difference and why, and getting to the root of things. And so I have to believe that was sort of good training in many ways for taking on a job that is pretty complex. When you think about the various objectives of a foundation, the challenges of being a great corporate foundation, and then to be a global foundation. How did you think about that evolution of the foundation through the times that you've been leading it?
Well, and it's a great point, because I really didn't know how valuable that training would be in this role, as first really developing programs, but probably most importantly is advocating, right? Advocating for important causes and really rallying a company the size of UPS with 500,000 employees and a management team of 90,000, because in the end, the work of the foundation is really executed by UPSers all over the world. So being able to advocate, bring people together, and then take that outside of UPS and being able to, what I believe is one of our strongest points, is to bring the humanitarian community together, because UPS can't do it alone. One company, one country can't do it alone. So I feel that that advocacy and that being able to show value to disparate stakeholders in order to bring them together is another feature in that legal training that you acquire as a lawyer.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, when you think about the scale of UPS and you think about that enormous network and all of that capability and the technology and the people and the extraordinary coverage, you know, it's just such a phenomenal platform through which to create impact. And one can really come to, at this day, to really appreciate the full extent. I mean, you must look at the sum of the impact that the foundation has created, where, on one hand, with a sense of enormous pride, and on the other, a sense of enormous amazement of what's happening. What have been sort of some of the hallmarks when you think about it, the sort of the stamp of your legacy that you are, you know, bring you the most joy on reflection?
Well, I will tell you, our humanitarian relief and resilience program is without a doubt one of the programs that's just been so impactful to so many and so impactful to UPSers. And I know we'll talk a lot more about that later, but let me also draw some attention to road safety and the programs that we've launched around training young drivers UPS techniques. Road accidents is the #1 killer of teenagers in the United States, but it's also by far disproportionately impact young drivers around the world. And so we launched this program called the UPS Road Code, which is a 5-hour seminar with youth organizations now in 9 countries. And we've trained literally 100,000 or more young drivers on our most important safety techniques as drivers. So I have a lot of pride in that program, and it really gets to playing to your strengths. You know, if I were to give a company advice on how to have a strong social impact, it's basically take your philanthropy, combine it with the resources of your company and the expertise of your people, and you are going to take off with any program that you select. Road safety is a program that we take a lot of pride in at the UPS Foundation.
That's brilliant advice, Ed. And I think that's always the challenge, particularly for a corporate foundation, and saying, you know, how do I find my center? How do I find those unique contributions that I bring? So I certainly resonate to what you're saying. The other thing that struck me in the time we've known each other and in the time that I've observed your work is this real strong emphasis on collaboration and the belief in public-private partnerships. And you've been a champion for those 2 concepts. I think wherever you could kind of bring them together, I think you've always seen them as multipliers in some ways. Could you share more about that and sort of how your thinking on that has evolved, and what are some of the lessons that you would give others on collaboration and public-private?
it again gets back to understanding that no one entity can really solve the world problems, and we're seeing that unfortunately become ever more apparent in solving the COVID-19 crisis. And it really stems around that. It also stems around another strength, I believe, of UPS, because in many ways we are a connector. And you're absolutely right. We do have a very large network, and the foundation has a great humanitarian network. And we find that in many ways, the private sector doesn't really know where to connect into huge institutions like the UN system. And so I think that I've always found a lot of opportunity to connect the private sector with the humanitarian community and have that force multiplier. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about helping the beneficiaries. It's not really about self-promotion for us. It's really about having that impact. And I know we'll also talk about the CBI network, but that is an initiative that I also take a lot of great pride in, because that's all about collaboration.
Why don't we go there and go ahead and flesh that out a little bit more, Ed, because certainly UPS has been one of the earliest, most visionary participants in that. I think your point about being a connector, almost seeing yourself as a connector, has played out over and over. And, you know, it never struck me, right? It should have. Here's somebody that goes point to point with every parcel on the planet, almost everywhere. The idea of figuring out how to connect up networks and see everything as a network is super. Tell us a little bit more about your journey with CBI and how that played into your passion.
Again, I love being part of the incubation of just a great idea. And before CBI came about, I mean, a lot of the humanitarian partners that we're involved in understood that preparedness really is a discount on recovery and a down payment on response. And that particular phrase was said by a friend of mine in the humanitarian community. I never forgot that. And so we expanded our approach. That's where we came to before our program became the Humanitarian Relief and Resilience Program. It was just humanitarian relief. The resilience piece came about because of our focus on preparedness. And so we began to work with small and medium-sized businesses in order to make them more resilient to a natural disaster. And in part is because, you know, small and medium-sized businesses, when a disaster occurs, probably 40 to 60% of them never build back. And without a business, you're not going to have a job. You're not going to have, you know, stores and groceries and communities find it very difficult to come back from a disaster if you don't have that strong business community. So we began going down that road. And but launching a program on your own is very difficult. And so when CBI was born, and Marcus Neto from UNDP approached me about the idea, and it was, you know, two great partners, UNDP and UN OCHA, that we were already working with this concept of going into high-risk communities and building these coalitions to better prepare them. That, to me, they had me at hello, because we were already trying to do that, and having these great organizations within the UN system add validity to the effort, I saw as a win-win-win. And that's what got me hooked into CBI.
That's really brilliant. And the other thing, you know, that I've observed, you as the network and the foundation are very, very effective in working with NGOs. and as part of other partners as well as government. What are the secrets to kind of great collaboration? What are the secrets to partnering? Because I've talked to others that find this perhaps one of the biggest challenges. They can certainly give the money away,
right,
but actually to build partnerships, what's the wisdom that you would have?
I think the understanding is that you have to respect each other as equals. And believe me, particularly in the humanitarian area, you know, our logisticians learn more from our humanitarian partners than they learn from us. So you really have to establish that respect for the work that the humanitarian community does, civil society in general. And then you have to build trust. That takes staying power in the good times and in the tough times. And so again, if I were to give someone in my position advice, it would be about respect and building trust.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret that any of these things, particularly in the humanitarian space, are hard. When the crisis strikes, it's enormously challenging. Nothing's the same. Everything is different. And it takes this fortitude and this energy to keep doing it. And I've always found it's the stories, right? It's the stories of the outcomes that provide energy and the commitment to keep going and to just keep getting better and better. As you look back, are there a few stories from your humanitarian experience that you say, this is really what it's about? This is why UPS makes a difference in this kind of situation.
I think it gets back to the stories that we hear back from our UPS volunteers. We call them experts on mission. They'll deploy with the World Food Program and the logistics cluster for an emergency. And in fact, we were talking about a situation where, we had two UPSers deployed in the second Haiti earthquake. And one of them was landing in a WFP helicopter. And they had bags of food and grain to distribute. And when the helicopter landed, the people rushed the helicopter. And one person was just shoved and pushed towards one of the rotors of the helicopter, which was still running. And the UPSer jumped out of the helicopter and pushed the person away, or else he would have run right into the rotor. And it's that story, that when we heard the UPSer tell it, even saying it to you today, it gives me chills.
Yeah.
Because that UPSer, it changed his life to see that. And that's what I mean about these experiences make us better people. We learn from the humanitarian community so much.
Yeah. I think we always like to believe that what we're doing is transformative. Sometimes we forget how transformative it is to us, yes, that we are often beneficiaries without even realizing the beneficiary that we've become through the experience in the process. Ed, what would the advice be that you would give to young professionals, to the next generation of those who are going to follow you? And whether they happen to have the privilege of being in the foundation or the privilege of having a heart for humanitarian service and finding themselves in a corporation, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm very optimistic about the generations that are coming up the line, whether it's here at UPS or elsewhere. And I do believe that everyone can make a difference. And everyone has to have that purpose. Without a purpose, you really don't have that North Star that everyone needs to continue advancing throughout a lifetime. And so, I would say to everybody, find your purpose. Your purpose will always be tied to doing something for others, whether it be in your profession or whether it be just out of helping humanity forward. And so I feel that that's my advice to the next generation is find your purpose, help others, one person can make a very powerful difference.
And Ed, that's spoken like the true humanitarian that you are. Mm-hmm. And that's so inspiring. Would you mind sharing with everyone a few of the other things that you are engaged in beyond the UPS Foundation? I know you have, when somebody has this sort of passion, it spills into other forms of service. Would you mind just sharing a couple of those?
Absolutely. And I can't not mention, you know, the other side of my role at UPS, which is as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the company. And certainly in a year like we've had, where systemic racism in the United States and in other parts of the world has surfaced again against the Black community, you know, I would again say that, you know, this is obviously something important for the entire global community, for the private sector, for civil society, for employers, that they step up and do more. I do believe that, you know, women is another area that needs to be addressed around the world around gender equality. And so those are passions of mine, certainly seeking more gender equality and more equality just overall around the world. And so I'm very heavily involved in those efforts here in the United States and elsewhere around the world.
Well, Ed, shortly you will officially retire. What are you going to do? I mean, if you don't mind me asking, you know, when you've done all of these things, how are you thinking about your retirement?
Right. There's still more to do. I think my initial work will be surrounded, you know, by my family, and give back to them, and quite frankly, from there, I know that there will be, you know, opportunities to help, you know, our global community in other ways, and so I look forward to that, because again, you know, once you have that purpose burning inside of you, it's not something that you can quell because you change your roles.
Well, let me just say what a joy it's been hearing your thinking, understanding a bit more about your journey, and most importantly, about hearing you express your passion and commitment to these things. I think as people have the opportunity to look more into your bio and your activities, I think it will continue to inspire. And you clearly have left a big legacy, and more importantly, have catalyzed things that continue to make the world better and will continue to do so. And so thank you for being such an inspiration. Thank you for having a humanitarian's heart and making it happen.
Thank you very much.